Signs of the Southland, Sunday, September 12th, 2021. This is actually our second recording of the day, isn't it, Mr. Grant? We did a great episode with Jonathan Shaheen of Georgia Tech's Women Dive just a little bit ago. If you haven't checked that out, I would go ahead and do so. What did you think about his interview?
I thought it was awesome. I actually wrote down a quote from it because I thought it was hilarious as a swimmer by trade. But talking about the nature of swimming, I thought it summed it up real well. If I go an 18 in the 50 free and someone else goes 19, I was faster, which we can dive into some of the stats on football and volleyball, which, may not always be the team with the most yards wins or something like that. But I love the perspective. It was an honor to have him on as a guest, and hopefully start something cool where we can bring in some actual experts on sports to talk about their sports. So
absolutely. Hopefully you guys like it. I think it was a really interesting experience. And we had a lot of fun putting it together. So that is going to be the previous episode in your feed. Right now, we have 40 minutes per Zoom to discuss the events of the past week in Georgia Tech sports. Are you ready, Mr. Grant?
Let's ride.
Starting with volleyball, its third week of action, they went undefeated at the Georgia Tech Classic and dropped 2 sets along the way. I know you were at one of these games. I was watching one of them while the Falcons sucked versus versus the Eagles. So I was going to say the Phillies, but that's not the right sport. Tell me what you saw. Tell me how you felt about it.
So, surprise, surprise, I actually went to 2. I went to Mississippi State and Indiana. I cannot turn my eyes away from a good old-fashioned Grant family rivalry, especially when my family does not care about the sport that's being played. But I really care about volleyball. So me and the gang were out and about for State and IU. Both games, pretty similar. We saw pretty similar roster makeup as we have, I guess, really all season so far. We saw starts from Berlino, Bergman, Brambilla, Tippett, McKissick, I think Kaiser, and Morris. Set off the top of my head, I think it was the same for both of them. Some spot duty from Pimentel, particularly to be a serve specialist. We saw Aaron Moss, the captain, come in with dialed up specific plays, it seemed, and then D'Amico to spell McKissick at setter. Again, great to see Pimentel and D'Amico rounding out some of that depth at setter and at libero/defensive specialist. I believe Pimentel was the specialist today, if I'm not mistaken, based on the set I was able to watch. In general, I thought we looked pretty decent. Indiana was a great show in coming back from a deficit, which teams, I believe, in every sport should, practice and get good at and know how to kind of put that head down and grind. They dropped the first set against Indiana. Mississippi State was a sweep and came back to win 3 in a row, despite being down 10-4, I believe was the biggest deficit in set 4. But they were also, just able to pull out a 12-2 run to put themselves right back in the catbird seat. In general, news and notes, concessions are back at O'Keefe. They have 10 more home games. They're getting UGA next weekend. If you do not have tickets to go see the Jackets play up in Death Valley, go check out O'Keefe. Always a great time. Basically a guaranteed sellout when UGA visits town, and O'Keefe for a sellout is fantastic, which folds nicely into my other observation of Thursday. Attendance of about 650, which is pretty solid for a Thursday night against Mississippi State, which is, not that they're bad. They are an SEC team. It's great to see a big name in the house, but it's not UGA or Clemson or Notre Dame, big rival, big volleyball power. The posted attendance for the Indiana game, probably weird because of the neutral game before them, but it was only posted at 2:30, and it looked more crowded than Mississippi State. So my takeaway is, I don't know what that figure was, but if you combine the attendance from the 3-game stand, it's probably the best tournament attendance. Like there's these preseason non-con tournaments that we have. Best combined attendance for Tech in quite some time. And what they say, winning breeds interest, and that when they're they're good. People are going to want to come down to see them, and people definitely did this weekend. So that was awesome to see.
Absolutely. I'll read out the attendance while I have them because I now have all three box scores in front of me. 623 for Mississippi State, 233, like you said, for Indiana, and then 549 for Oklahoma. I actually got a chance to watch most, if not all, the Oklahoma game. Couple of notes while I was live tweeting it. I'd have to go back and grab the actual live tweet notes, but I didn't see Dowd in this game. She's not listed on the box score either. She didn't make an appearance. I think she was on the bench and dressed, so she was definitely available for selection. Tippett did not play. The box score lists Tippett as a libero for set one, and then Pimentel for the entire rest of the match. That's interesting. I think that's something to keep in the back pocket, at least in terms of a libero rotation. We learned that the Oklahoma head coach is an alumna of the program, of the Georgia Tech program, which I thought was super cool. And she did a great alumni thing by donating a match to Georgia Tech.
True.
I'm not going to be that much Hayden Spurrier today, but I at least from what I saw, Bergman was really, 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 really good in this OU game. 24 points just for her alone. Bertolino was also a really good addition in this match. 15 points. She was all over the place and really strong in her performance. I think across the entire weekend, you'd say. We saw a really good performance from Morissette as well. The announcers were really happy with the way that she was performing. Really made some really critical stops here and there in the front line. And it was a really strong performance, really strong weekend. They did drop that first set to OU 29-27, but then the middle two sets were not close. 25-14, 25-18. They sort of just established their will. And then the last one was pretty close. Oklahoma really put up a fight in set 4, but just couldn't seal the deal. It was a really interesting game. I enjoyed it.
I had a comment because I did watch the 29-27 set. Tech did manage to rally from being a decent amount down in that, so I thought that was very good, and it made me interested in continuing to consume this content. But when I got in my car and turned on rec radio, I thought that it would be on the sport, rec radio 91.1. But they were just playing the usual rec radio fare. So I'm not really sure where one would find them over the airwaves. Usually I, watch in person or ACC Network Extra. But if anyone has insight on that, let us know, because definitely couldn't find them over the traditional airwaves, which I thought was interesting because they're usually on that. But I guess segueing into it, how can we catch them next week?
Excellent, T. Let me kick it off for you. This coming week, you will maybe have to catch them on the radio because there's no TV broadcast in Raleigh when they take on Arkansas at 3 p.m. on the 16th. But there will be a TV broadcast and hopefully a radio broadcast for the 7 p.m. game versus Athens on the 18th. That one's at home.
That's a night game?
Yes.
Am I no? The Clemson game's at 3:30. I was like,
you would not be able to make it back. You would have to leave at kickoff to make it back.
Oops.
You can just watch it on the way back. You can watch it on the way back.
I got my hopes up too high. But the Arkansas, NC State, Athens, Georgia Tech little quadrangle. I guess they don't do a full quadrangle because the SEC teams play the ACC teams. But that's always an interesting little thing. It's happened the last 3 non-COVID years, I believe, and I don't know, cool to see some consistency there. So should be good.
Quickly looking up Arkansas volleyball as I have a minute here. They are 8-1, so they're doing pretty well. Just looking casually through their schedule, I'm not going to say they haven't played nobody, but also they haven't played nobody. So
how about the old Athenians?
Let's jump over to their schedule. The women's volleyball schedule. They are internet show. That's from last season. I want this season. No, I don't want to give you cookies.
They can track you as somebody who likes Athenian sports if you do that. So
they are 4-5. They had a scrimmage canceled versus Wake Forest. Morehead State, Winthrop, Pepperdine. Pepperdine was close. That went to a fifth set. They played Arizona State tight. Looks like they won one set versus Nebraska, which honestly is kind of an experience in and of itself. Lost to Omaha.
They thank Banner for that, honestly.
Potentially. Went to a fifth set versus Florida State, which is interesting, but lost. Lost to Florida Gulf Coast 3-1. Beat UCF 3-2. They'll take on NC State later this week. They'll go in Raleigh, and then they'll come see us on the Saturday.
Wait. So we beat UCF, who beat Florida State, and Florida State also beat UGA.
Florida State lost to Georgia.
Florida State lost to UGA, but UGA beat UCF.
Yes.
I can't work that triangle out in my head anymore. Never mind.
Don't try to transitive property yourself into this one. It's volleyball. It's not swimming. It doesn't work. It doesn't make sense that way.
Fair enough.
All right, let's move on. We have other in-state sports to talk about. Georgia Tech football played Kennesaw State this past weekend, winning 45-17. It was a nice little bounce back performance versus an FCS squad that runs the triple after a not so great performance versus NIU. I have some stats. I actually have a lot of stats. Let's be clear. I also have the box score for all of this, pulled up the advanced box score. But given that you're the vibesy person here, I want to hear your take first before I go into the nitty gritty.
I think the line at the top of the sheet says it all. This is how both of these first two games should have gone. It was a little bit closer than I would have liked to just be like, okay, NIU is a fluke. They got this. Let's ride. But we won by 28 points, something like that. We made a field goal. Like those are good things. I think it was a little bit fluky that it was as close as it was, given that the onside kick and that whole dealio happened, and whatever, we learned. But yeah, no, in terms of the vibesiness of it, I left dehydrated and sunburnt, and that's a nooner for you. So,
oh yeah, this was hot. I kept having to reapply sunscreen. I was chugging water the entire time. It was scorching. We got a lot of cloud cover in the second half, which was a godsend. But it was hot. It was very hot, and I think attendance also kind of showed that. This was not. I don't know whether it was the opponent. Obviously, COVID was also a concern. Still, but attendance was not as good as it could have been, and I think that is, that's something to keep an eye on moving forward.
It's also reflective of losing to NIU in week 1, but to their credit, KSU did bring more fans than NIU, obviously, because they're way closer, and they brought their band, which I always really like to see.
There was a nice little performance for 9/11 that was this weekend. A nice little joint performance between both bands, which I thought was really cool. A lot of that band made a lot of noise from the corner that they're usually stuck in. It's not like UNC where we stick their band in the upper deck for quote unquote.
It's also
reasons.
not like UNC where they bring 20 people. they were filling up the whole section, so you love to see it.
Yeah, it was a really, really awesome thing to see. Even if they're 40 minutes up the road, it's still nice to see the band, see those perform at halftime, and everyone have a lot of fun. Let's move on to talking about the game itself. I have stats. What do you want to hear first? Lay it on.
Your stats guy. What's your favorite stat?
I personally like Jordan Yates is plus 15 completion percentage over expected on his throws. Basically, on all of his throws, his completion percentage was 15% over what we would expect it from the average quarterback, based on their performance or their completion rate on those throws and depending on the distance. The distance in the air, not the distance that the actual completion went for. I think that was really awesome to see. I will note, it obviously comes with a caveat. The offense seemed pretty designed to keep it short to medium, right? Per completion, he only had about 9 air yards. So you're looking really in that medium length throw range for the most part. He had some veteran savvy at points. At a couple of times when NIU or not NIU, when Kennesaw brought pressure, and we're able to at least get him out of the pocket. He was able to get rid of the ball, throw it away, where I think other quarterbacks that we've seen in the past, or even maybe Yates last season, would have tried to make a play. But instead he, took the safe route. He threw it away. Stuff like that, where he wasn't focused on trying to make a risky decision, but he was more focused on, I think the game manager title is a little negative historically, but he really was. He was just, he was going with the flow of the game. He was making decisions that were, sure, they were safe, but they were reliable. They were consistent when he was throwing the ball. The offensive scheme was really good. I think we saw the exact similar play calls from last week, but he was actually able to execute. We saw a lot of receivers schemed open. Yates had the downfield vision to find them. Whether that's because of the scheme or the comparative lack of athleticism of athletes at the FCS and G5 level, I think that's up for interpretation. But he had a really good, all of this to say, and I have a bunch more stats if we want to go through them, but all of this to say, for his debut start, he had a really, really nice game, and I was really, really impressed. It comes with a ton of caveats, but I was impressed.
Yeah, I mean, just from my less statsy view, it seemed like he played confident, and that usually lends to good results. It also is worth noting that I think this was in terms of kind of, we talk Kyrick McGowan as being the not necessarily safe outlet, but like a good, a good safety valve for the offense, and I think that really shone through with his performances. He was very efficient.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I'll add some color to that. 5 targets, 5 catches, 77 yards, 2 TDs, good enough for 1.04 expected points added per play. Like, really, really strong performance. Obviously that EPA per play is inflated a little bit because of the 2 TDs, but I really enjoy the energy, sort of the intensity they brought to the game. Really shifty runner. You saw him brought out in motion a couple times. It was they had a good matchup for him, and they exploited it in this game.
Yep. And then I don't know, I think the stats and the PFF grades back this up, but I think Dante Smith was probably my running back of the week, which always good to see. Always, it's kind of hard to get oxygen in that group, because there's a lot of them that are super talented, but this was his week and they called his number, and I think he stepped up.
Absolutely. So we had some discussion earlier in the writers' room that, I mean, there's 3 starting caliber running backs on this roster, right? You have Jahmyr Gibbs, you have Jemias Griffin, and you have Dante Smith. Dante Smith had a really good game. You mentioned the PFF grade. He was the 2nd ranked running back in PFF grades in week 2 at 90.6, and number 1 was 90.7. So he was really, really good. He had 8 carries, 82 yards, and a touchdown, 10 yards per play, 0.67 EPA per play. Really, really good performance. He was exceptional at really hard, really tough, like bowling ball style running through the middle, and even on sweeps. Once he was able to turn the corner around the tackle, he was able to really explode and just kind of bowl people over. So
I think it's crazy that we can mention 3 starting caliber running backs, and the 4th option in there, Jordan Mason, like, he ain't no slouch either, man.
I think I might have. I mean, that's 4. I forgot Jordan Mason, the original rotation, and just swapped him in with Jemias Griffin because that's the name I have in front of me. But like, all 4 of them, like, those are 4 starting caliber running backs, and 2 of them are from an option recruited roster. I mean, in terms of running, like the talent is there. I do want to dampen some of those expectations, though. I want to offer a little bit of a caveat because the offensive line play in this game was not good enough to support that running game consistently, right? Kennesaw State had a really good. Kennesaw State's defense was able to generate a lot of pressure. I think the number that I have here is 26% of Georgia Tech snaps. They got pressure. And that's pretty concerning to me. The Tech allowed 3 sacks. They only had 2 line yards per carry. It's really weird to see some of those things happen from a P5 offensive line against an FCS program. And obviously the score, you can kind of say, ooh, score margin, 45 points, 17 like versus 17, whatever. But I mean, you're looking at, you're not going to play that same lower level of talent up front in the trenches every game. And now you're going to have to deal with Clemson next week, who gave Georgia's line the business in week 1. And then you're going to have to deal with other, like Miami's defensive line. You're going to have to deal with North Carolina. All these other teams that will play you tight up front, and putting together this kind of uneasy, for lack of a better term, performance versus an FCS team is kind of not productive, or at least does not bode well in my eyes.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not just going to leave it at I agree, but you know me. I want to go into this next game with the starry-eyed. Like, we watched it all clean. We came out and did great, but like, it seems like the offensive line thing, like 2 games starts to become a trend, does it not?
Yeah, and I don't have the advanced stats for the NIU game. ESPN still hasn't posted the play-by-play data for that for whatever reason. But I mean, the offensive line play is one of those things where, like I said, it flows. It limits the effectiveness of an entire stable of running backs that are really good, right? And I think if you look at the rushing performance in the advanced stats from this game, you'll see that it was actually pretty poor overall. Dante Smith had a really good game. Like I said, 0.67 EPA per play, but every other running back was negative. Overall, the team was 0.08 EPA per rush. It's not, and they only averaged 5.6 yards per rush. It's not what you would expect from a P5 team versus an or FCS team in this spot. I think another thing that I want to note while I have it in front of me is that Tech was stopped, so that's a gain of less than 2 yards on 56% of their runs. They were stuffed on 26. Well, those are 2 different stats, I think, but they were stuffed on 6% of their runs. I might be comparing 2 different stats between the 2 spreadsheets I have. But my point is that this is not good, right? When you have your line, when you're looking at this, 56% of your rushing snaps are stopped runs that went for 2 yards or fewer. That is not productive rushing performance. And a lot of that, considering the distance, is on your offensive line.
Mm-hmm. The Freudian slip about almost saying an FSU instead of an FCS, I appreciated that.
They had their own thing that we could discuss later, but that's an entirely separate item.
Yep. Anyways, I know we only have 40 minutes on the Zoom. Should we move on to defense?
Absolutely. So one of our fellow writers, Nishant, was sitting next to me at this game. He was in town, and it was nice to chat about some of the schematic stuff that was going on, especially defensively. I think we were looking for some improvement, some schematic improvement from the NIU game. A couple of things that we saw, Tech in some situations was running some cover 1. A lot of instances of the 2 linebackers setting up on the edge of the defensive line just to limit the options horizontal movement. The KSU set up a lot in that traditional flex bone package that we used to see from Paul Johnson, but KSU was doing it, and Brian Bohannon was doing it at KSU. It was kind of interesting to see the schematic, the offensive formation differences. Actually, I think I kind of expected KSU to run that same flexbone pattern, but out of the shotgun, and do a little bit more with it. But it was weird that they sort of had the dogma of staying in the traditional Paul Johnson flexbone and only brought it out into the shotgun when they knew it was an obvious passing situation. I thought that was pretty interesting. Other like actual defensive notes that I wanted to touch on. You cannot give up almost 400 yards to an FCS program. I'm rounding up quite a bit. It was more like 350, but that's not particularly acceptable, considering the supposed gulf between the programs in terms of talent quality. They allowed minus 0.24 EPA per play, which granted is a pretty good mark, but I will say in the air, they allowed 0.31 total EPA. And I think that's dulled by a couple of picks. So yeah, there's room for improvement, especially in coverage. I think there were a couple blown coverages that we saw, especially in that sequence that you mentioned earlier, where KSU scored a touchdown, got the onside kick, and then scored a touchdown again. There were a couple blown coverages in that sequence that sort of led to that mini comeback. And I think something that we noted on Twitter as well is that the one defense was still up 28 points in the second half. And they were
giving up those.
Yeah, and those two touchdowns were from the starters. So there's, on the defensive side of the ball, there is a lot of room for improvement. And I want to see. I think we'll talk about the Clemson game maybe in a bit here, but maybe you use next week as a mulligan, but that something about that has to get better. Something about the coverage there has to get better. And I'm not schematically advanced or schematically knowledgeable enough to say what it is. And maybe it's the way that they played in this game, selling out to stop the flex bone, to stop the run, is what made them so vulnerable in some of these coverage situations, playing a lot of man-to-man. But something has to change in those situations, and we need to start seeing some improvement there.
I will say, at least we beat the triple this time.
Don't remind me. We still had to. We podcasted after the Citadel one, didn't we?
I thought we became like a food podcast for a week or something.
We did. It was bad.
No, I was at the goal line when that happened. It was not awesome, but here we are. We won this week, and we're not going to have a goose egg on the year in the record. So
yeah. I just want to touch on special teams while we have a minute. It looks like we only have 10 minutes, so we're going to have to rattle some of this stuff off. Punting was okay. I'm not.
Wait. One more defense thing.
Oh, I have another defense thing?
No, I do.
Go for it.
It's the one we all know. Awesome to see from Jordan Dominic. I think he's getting his due time in the sun. His scoop and score was fantastic.
Yeah, he also threw Charlie Thomas into a block, which was very funny.
Oh yeah, great play. Well worth all the accolades and the TV time and the interview and the Lamar Jackson retweet, all that stuff. Congrats. He's been a great player, somebody to watch going forward too.
Absolutely. All right, on to special teams while I still have some time here. Punting was okay. Like I said a little bit earlier, it's not Presley Harvin quality. Obviously, nothing is ever going to be that quality. I think Shanahan's doing it pretty true. Shanahan's doing a pretty good job. I mean, it's like, I think the punts that I saw were like 46, 47 yards. They could be better, but obviously you're comparing it to possibly an all-time punter quality there. So I'm not going to complain too much. I will complain a little bit about the punt defense. There was one gashing return allowed in the third quarter that I think Tech can improve on. Brent Samaglia had a really great day. I think especially after last week, this was a really good day for him. Hit the one field goal that we had him do, and then all of his XPs. So that's really good to see. Our place kicker or kickoff duty guy, who I can't remember who it was today, or I can't
Gavin
remember.
Stewart, right?
I think it was Gavin Stewart this weekend. All but one of his kickoffs were touchbacks, and the other kickoff was fair caught at like the 5. So
that's like 7 for 8 on touchbacks.
Yeah. So improvement there. The only thing that I will note, only other negative that I'll note there, they did give up that onside kick recovery that then led to another a long Kennesaw touchdown. So I think a consistent thing that we've said over the years of the Collins regime so far has been that the special teams defense needs some work, and I think that still holds.
Yep. Do we have any numbers? I know the Bindex isn't out until like Tuesday, but anything else on that?
I do not have Bindex numbers. If you want me to go through some of the other numbers on the sheet that I have in front of me, I can. SP Plus did get updated today. So Tech has the 64th overall team. That's the 77th ranked offense, 52nd ranked defense, and 88th ranked special teams. That's kind of exactly where I expected them to be, sort of very middle of the road, not super good, not super bad. In terms of other advanced stats that I have in front of me, they had a 60% success rate based on EPA when passing, which I thought was super cool. They created 26% of their first downs off of early downs. I don't have a comparison number to throw at you on there, but I think that's pretty good. I will note that they rushed on 60% of early downs of first and second down. I don't like that. It's been a consistent theme, but it's also not super, analytic savvy to keep running on early downs. But at the same time, I think that the counter to that argument is you have a stable of 4 ACC starting caliber running backs. You can afford to do that and pass a little less.
You got to get the talent on the field.
Yeah, absolutely. Other than that, I'm not seeing anything else that pops out at me on the stat sheet. There are a couple of bugs that I need to fix on the site, but that I've seen. But other than that, I'm not seeing anything super interesting. I maybe we could double back to Yates for a second just to round out some of his CPOE numbers, that completion percentage over expected. 15%, like I said, on all throws, but when it was throws over 10 air yards, so that's 10 yards traveled in the air on that throw, he was plus 28 and then plus 36 on over 20 air yards. So that's really good. I don't have sample sizes on those numbers in front of me, but still really good. ESPN had him at 65 QBR, a QBR of 65. That's good enough for 49th in the nation. That's after an opponent adjustment. So I think his unadjusted one was around 79. But obviously you make an adjustment for the FCS opponent. An update on Jeff Sims. He was dressed. He was on the sideline. It was reported that he would be available, but he did not appear in this game. Yates played the entire way, and again had a pretty good start. We got 5 minutes left on the clock. Anything else that you want to mention?
Well, my mother is calling me, so let's make this fast for that reason as well. As far as KSU goes, that covers it. As far as Clemson goes,
lol.
We know they are who we think they are.
We are. Okay, Dennis Green. Let me pull up the spread at least so I can read that off. Clemson is favored by 29 points from Circus Sports with an over/under of 57.5. I don't have SP Plus in front of me again to tell you how good of a projection that is, but after last year, I think any and all margins are potentially on the table, and I will leave it at that.
All right, let's leave it then.
Yeah, let's leave it. All right, Mr. Grant, I will see you next week. I will also see the rest of you listeners next week with a recap potentially of Clemson. Maybe, probably, I don't know. maybe we'll turn into a food podcast again.
All right. We'll talk soon.